never felt like I really belonged to this family. When I was little, I couldn't explain it in words. It was more of a feeling. In my childhood drawings, I always drew myself a little apart from my parents and brother, as if I subconsciously knew that I wasn't part of them. My brother, Alex, was always our pride. From childhood, he was praised for the slightest achievements, bought the best toys, taken to clubs and told, "He's so talented." Me, I was always in the background. I didn't envy him, I just didn't understand. Why? Am I not their daughter too? Don't I deserve love? I got used to it. I got used to being praised out of politeness, but never sincerely. I got used to being given gifts just for the sake of it, while my brother was given them with love and pride. But one day, when I was 10, I asked my mother, "Mom, why do you hug me so rarely?" She froze. For a moment, it seemed to me, her eyes filled with anxiety. But a second later, she smiled tensely. "What nonsense, darling. Of course I love you." I didn't argue, but something inside me clenched. That tense smile, that alien look. I couldn't understand then what exactly was bothering me. But now, years later, I know. She didn't love me. She was afraid of me. Then I didn't know why. But soon I will know the whole truth. In every house, there is a place where children are not allowed to go. In our house, that place was the attic. My parents always said that old things were stored there, unnecessary junk that would be sorted out someday. But of course they never did. I didn't pay any attention to it. Until that day. I was 17 the first time I was alone in the house. My parents were away for the weekend at some event. Alex was at college. The house was empty. Silence, and a strange feeling of freedom. I don't know why my feet led me to the stairs to the attic that day. I just felt like I needed to go up there. The door to the attic was always closed, but that day it was unlocked. It was as if someone was waiting for me to go there. I slowly walked up the stairs. The smell of dust hit my nose. Old furniture, boxes, cobwebs in the corners. It seemed that no one had been here for years. But among all this junk, a chest immediately caught my eye. Not a cardboard box, not a pile of unnecessary things, but a massive wooden chest with metal locks. It looked like it was hiding something important. I knelt down and carefully opened it. On top lay old baby things. Small booties, toys, a faded photograph of a baby. I frowned. I didn't remember these toys. I didn't remember having these things. I dug deeper and came across a yellowed envelope. There were no signatures on it. Just a date. My birthday. I slowly tore the envelope open and took out the papers. And in that second, the world around me shook. It was my birth certificate, but not with my last name. Not with my parents. It wasn't me, but the birth date matched. I stared at the document, and an icy realization began to build in my chest. Whoever I had been all these years, I wasn't their real daughter. The world in front of me seemed to freeze. I stared at the document, but my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Name, surname, parents. None of it was mine, but the birth date matched. I ran my finger over the paper, trying to convince myself that it was a mistake, that it might be a document of some distant relative I didn't know. But then, why was it in the trunk, hidden under layers of dust? I continued digging through the trunk until my fingers came across another envelope. This time it was closed, and on it was written Catherine, only if necessary. I shuddered. It was my mother's handwriting. I slowly tore the envelope open. There was a letter inside. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. If you're reading this, it means I can't control the truth anymore. Catherine, you were never our daughter. We took you in when you were a baby. Your real parents, they tried to find you, but we made sure they never found you. I'm sorry. You were never supposed to know that. I dropped the letter. My chest tightened. My head spun. I was stolen. I wasn't adopted. I was taken. I jumped to my feet, my heart pounding. Every memory from my childhood began to take on new meaning. My parents' distance, my mother's coldness, the forbidden questions. I always felt like something was wrong, but I had no idea how much. I didn't know who I was, but I knew one thing for sure. Now they will pay for everything. I stood in the middle of the attic, feeling a chill run down my spine. My parents weren't my parents. I wasn't their daughter. They stole me. But then who were my real parents? I grabbed the trunk and turned it over, shaking out everything that was in there. Papers, old things, photographs. I was looking for anything that could give me an answer. And then I saw it, a yellowed newspaper clipping. In the very center, a photograph of a baby. My breath caught in my throat. That baby was me. I quickly scanned the headline. Baby missing from hospital. Parents plead for help. I closed my eyes, trying to fight off a wave of panic. They didn't just steal me. They took me from the hospital on my birthday. My real parents. They were looking for me. And those I considered family were doing everything they could to stop them. I grabbed the newspaper and ran downstairs to my laptop. I needed to find them. I opened the internet, typed the name of the newspaper and the date into the search engine. A minute later, an old archived report opened in front of me. Baby kidnapped. Parents will pay any amount for information. I scrolled down the article and saw their photos. 2 people. A man and a woman. They were my parents. I felt it with every cell in my body. I started shaking. I looked into the faces of people I had never seen, but who had been looking for me all their lives. A fire flared up in my chest. Now I knew the truth. Now I had a plan. I stared at my laptop screen, studying the photos of 2 strangers. But were they really strangers? I knew with every cell in my body, these were my real parents. But I couldn't afford to believe blindly. I needed proof. I quickly typed their names into social media. My chest tightened when I saw the woman's page. Her eyes. They were the same as mine. My heart was pounding. The last post was a year ago. Today marks 22 years since we lost our baby. But we never lose hope. A cold sweat broke out across me. They were still looking for me. I frantically closed my laptop. I couldn't text them. I couldn't just show up and say, "Hi, I think I'm your daughter." I needed to be sure. The next morning, I ordered a DNA test. I didn't tell anyone. I felt like a criminal hiding a secret. Every time I made eye contact with Mother, I would tremble. How long had she lived with this? How could she look me in the eye, knowing she had stolen me? I couldn't see her as my mother anymore. The 2 weeks of waiting dragged on endlessly. But when the results finally came, I knew what they would be. I opened the email with the results and froze. A 99.9% match. It wasn't a mistake. I was their daughter. And the people who raised me all my life were liars. My hands no longer trembled. There was no more doubt. Now I knew exactly what to do. They took my life. And now I will destroy them. I couldn't stop staring at the screen. 99.9% match. This is not a mistake. I was not their daughter. I was a stolen child. I took a shaky breath and looked at the woman's photo again. My real mother. Her eyes. I saw a part of myself in them now. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to text her. But what would I say? "Hello, I believe I am your daughter, who was stolen 22 years ago." No, that's not right. I scrolled down. The comments under her post. People wrote words of support. Some recalled the old story of the kidnapping. Some expressed hope. And among all these people, I saw another name. My real father. I clicked on his profile. On the cover is an old photograph of a newborn baby. The caption underneath, "We will never stop looking for you." I closed my eyes. Anger, pain, rage, all mixed up in my chest. These people lost me. But not because they wanted to. They didn't abandon me. I was taken away from them. And those who called themselves my parents were never my family. I knew I couldn't just show up in their lives. But I could find a way to get closer. And I knew where to start. I had to find out the whole truth. And that meant I would have to look into the eyes of those who stole my life. I didn't sleep all night. My thoughts were all in one direction. I knew who my real parents were. I knew I'd been kidnapped. But I didn't know why. Why would these people I'd considered family for so many years do something like this? I had to find out the truth. And I knew the only way to do that was to make them talk. In the morning, I went downstairs. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. My father was standing by the window, drinking coffee. They looked so normal. As if their world wasn't built on lies. I sat down across from her, looking straight at my mother. "Who am I?" She looked up. "What? Who am I really?" I repeated, clenching my fists. Her hand twitched, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Catherine, what questions?" I slowly pulled the DNA test out of my pocket and threw it on the table. Father froze. Mother turned pale. "Explain this to me," I said, looking straight into her frightened eyes. "Now." For a second, there was absolute silence in the house. I saw her trying to make up a lie, but I didn't let her. "You stole me, didn't you?" My voice was icy. Mother shuddered. "Catherine. My name is not Catherine." She pressed her lips together and turned away. Father put his cup down heavily on the table. "It was a mistake," he muttered. "A mistake." I didn't recognize my voice. It was shaking with rage. "You kidnapped me. Condemned my real parents to hell. This is not a mistake. It's a crime." My mother slowly closed her eyes. "They weren't supposed to find you." Those were the words that hit me the hardest. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to justify it. She just wanted the truth to never come out. I clenched my teeth. "You knew they were looking for me all these years. You knew I was alive, but you didn't give them a chance." She didn't answer. I felt a wave of hatred rising inside me. These people, these liars, they took my life, and now I'm going to take theirs. I stood up from the table and headed for the door. "Catherine," my father whispered. I stopped at the door and turned around. "Don't you dare call me that." And then I walked out, because I had a real future ahead of me. I was going to meet my real family, and no one could stop me. I had never felt such excitement. I sat in my car in front of a house that felt both foreign and familiar to me. This was their home, the people who had spent their entire lives searching for me. I looked at the front door, knowing that my true family was behind it, the ones who had suffered all these years, the ones who had hoped that I would return someday. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. My legs were shaking as I approached the door. "Can I just knock? What should I say?" "Hello, am I your daughter?" I raised my hand and knocked sharply before I could change my mind. A few seconds later, the door opened. A woman stood before me. She was older than in the photo, but her eyes... my eyes. She looked at me, holding her breath. "Yes." My voice shook. You're Sarah Miller?" The woman nodded slowly. I swallowed, my heart pounding in my chest. I think I'm your daughter." She froze. A look of shock, fear, and hope flashed across her face. I saw her hand shaking. "What did you say?" "I'm your daughter." I took the DNA test out of my pocket and handed it to her. She looked at it, unable to touch it, and then she started crying. Before I could say anything, she rushed to me, hugging me so tightly that I couldn't breathe. "Oh, God, my girl, my baby." She sobbed in my arms. I felt the last wall crumble inside me. I couldn't hold back my tears. I'm finally home. I heard footsteps behind me. "Sarah, who is that?" I turned around and saw him. My father. He looked at me as if he couldn't believe it was real. I didn't have time to say anything. He stepped forward and gently touched my face. Are you ours?" I nodded, unable to speak. His eyes filled with tears. He held me close, and I felt something I'd never felt in my previous family. Real love, real connection, real family. But deep down I knew the ones who kidnapped me hadn't paid in full yet, and I was going to finish this story. I spent a few days with my real parents. They were the strangest, most emotional days of my life. I listened to their stories, how they searched for me, how they never gave up, how every year on my birthday they left a candle on the windowsill, hoping that I was still alive. I tried to imagine the pain they had gone through, and anger boiled inside me. They could have been with me all these years, but my kidnappers had taken that life from us. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I had to destroy their world the same way they had destroyed mine, and I knew how to do it. That evening I sent a message to Mother. "I need to talk to you. Tomorrow, 12 o'clock in the park. Alone." A few minutes later, I got a reply. "You have to forget everything you learned. Please, just come home." I clutched the phone in my hand, feeling the rage rising inside me. They still thought they could manipulate me. The next day, I arrived at the park at 12 p.m. sharp. She was already waiting for me. My mother. When she saw me, her eyes filled with pleading. "Catherine," her voice was quiet, trembling. "Don't call me that." She pressed her lips together. "Listen, you don't understand. We loved you." I laughed. Loudly. Hardly. "You loved me." I stepped closer. Loved me so much that you robbed me of my real life? Loved me so much that you stole me from the people who had been looking for me all my life? She hung her head, but I didn't let her back down. Where was your love when you looked into the eyes of a woman who had lost her daughter and told her you didn't know where she was? Where was your love when you made me feel like a stranger in my own home? She began to cry. I was stupid. We were stupid. No, I shook my head. You were cruel. She grabbed my hands. Please don't do this. It's too late. They'll put us in jail. I looked her straight in the eyes. After that meeting, my mother never tried to contact me again. But that didn't mean she didn't try to save herself. I saw the shutters close on their house. My father stopped going outside, and they lived in constant fear. But fear is just the beginning. I wanted them to lose everything. The first step was simple. I contacted a journalist who had once covered my case. I showed him the documents. I told him the whole truth. Do you understand that this will be an explosion? He looked at me, not believing what was happening. I'm counting on it. The next day, the news was all over the media. Shocking truth. Kidnapped baby finds his real family after 22 years. Names. Photos. The world found out who they really were. I saw how it destroyed them. Their friends turned away. Work. Dad was fired that same day. Everyone looked at them with disdain. And then, finally, the police showed up. I was standing by the window when 2 cars pulled up to their house. I saw my mother run out of the house, clutching her heart. I saw my father try to explain something to the police, but they wouldn't listen. They arrested him in front of the neighbors. My mother screamed, but I didn't feel sorry. I just smiled. It was the end of them. But I knew there was something left. The last meeting. They had to hear my last word. And tomorrow I will give them a chance. But it will be their last hope. I hadn't planned on seeing them again. But when I got the notice that my mother wanted to meet before the trial, I knew they were broken. I wasn't afraid. I had been waiting for this moment. The visiting room was cold. A hard chair, gray walls. And across from me, there she was. My mother. The woman who had stolen me. She looked broken. Dark circles under her eyes, trembling fingers, slumped shoulders. She wasn't strong anymore. She was nothing now. I sat down slowly across from her, crossing my arms. She looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, Are you happy? I chuckled. Very happy. She shuddered. Khatri, don't call me that. She fell silent. I looked her straight in the eyes. Why did you do this? She pressed her lips together, tears welling up in her eyes. I can't tell you this. You have to. She turned away. I wasn't capable of having children. I froze. What? She exhaled, clasping her hands. I wanted a child. Your father and I couldn't conceive. I was crazy. I thought that if I just took you, you would be mine. My breath caught in my throat. You took me away from the people who loved me. She sobbed. I thought I could love you too. But I leaned forward slowly. But you couldn't. She covered her face with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. You were always a stranger to me. Silence. Those words. She never loved me. I stood up. You wanted me to forgive you? She sobbed. I just wanted you to know the truth. I looked down at her. I thought I would feel relief, that I would say something cruel. But I just didn't want to see her anymore. You don't exist for me anymore. And I turned and walked away, leaving her in the void. Because now I knew who I was. And I was free. I walked out of the courthouse, feeling the air suddenly clearer, freer. I had left the past behind. The years of lies behind. The people who stole my life behind. But what now? What do I do next? I looked up and saw them. My real parents. They were waiting for me on the courthouse steps, worry in their eyes. I could see how afraid they were that I would change my mind, that I would decide to leave, that I would not accept them. But they were wrong. I took a step forward, then another, and the next moment, my real mother held me close. We were so afraid that you would reject us, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I squeezed her hands tighter. I just want to get to know you. My father gently touched my shoulder. We have so many years ahead of us for this. I closed my eyes, breathing in their scent. I felt warmth spreading in my chest. I was finally home. The ones who built their lives on lies were left behind. Now they were sitting in cells, awaiting punishment. They had lost everything. And I finally got myself. A new life was ahead, and now it belonged only to me. I thought I had put an end to this story. But the past doesn't let go so easily. They were in prison. They had lost everything. But one morning I received a letter. From her. From the woman who had stolen me. I stared at the envelope for a long time, hesitating to open it. Part of me wanted to just burn it, throw it away, forget about it. But another part of me still wanted to understand. I slowly opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. Her handwriting was sloppy, nervous. I began to read. Catherine, or whatever your name is now. I know you hate me. I know you won't forgive me. And you're right. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth. We chose you for a reason. We knew who you were. Your real parents. They're not who they seem. We saved you from them. And one day you'll realize you made a mistake. Asterisk, asterisk. My fingers tightened. I reread the last lines again. They knew who I was. They claimed to have saved me. But from what? I looked up and looked into the mirror. I wanted to close this chapter of my life. But what if? The truth was more complicated than I thought. Now I had a new question. And I was ready to know the real truth.